Awesome. Okay. Good evening, everyone. So, in today's class, we have predominantly environment related articles. And a part of this, we already started a discussion upon this. This is related to the Supreme Court judgment in the context of the environmental clearances. All right. So, in this article, it's a traditional argument saying that if Supreme Court itself is breaching the environmental clearances, then there is no hope. This is the line of argument taken in this article. I'll set a context. Why is environmental clearance needed? So that environment is not damaged. Simple funda. So what happened in this Creda versus One Shakti judgment? Supreme Court gave a clearance in such a way that, let's say you started a project without environmental clearance and you invested a lot of money. If you stop that project now, it will cause a lot of economic pain. On that practical utility alone, Supreme Court gave a judgment saying that in some extreme cases, we can have a environmental clearance even after the project is started. This is the fundamental violation of the principle on which environmental clearance is even brought into the legislation. What is the logic? Logic is an economic model should not distort environment to such an extent that you can't restore the ecological health. To take that precaution only, this environmental impact assessment is there. So in this judgment, Supreme Court violating that principle is a violation of Article 21, right to life, and as an extension, you can even talk about how if you are destroying the environment that a human resides in, or even if you take the rights of the animals or every life form that is there, it is a violation of all those principles. This is the line of argument taken. But let's play the devil's advocate, meaning we should criticize or maybe see the other side of the argument. Don't you think Supreme Court is aware of this fact? Then why do you think Supreme Court must have given this? Is it because, see, for the sake of convenience, you can say that Supreme Court is, being biased or partisan, and therefore it is doing away with environmental laws also. This is the standard defeatist mindset or the defeatist argument that you can come up with. It's true, environmental clearances should never be diluted. There's no question about it. But the fact that our Chief Justice was talking about this principle as a exception but not a norm, it in itself clarifies that this stance is not supposed to be treated like a norm. Okay, so on one end of the spectrum, we are saying that we should not destroy environment. On the other end, we are saying that if we don't allow this kind of environmental clearances, ex post facto clearances, what will happen? Lot of economic pain will be there. Imagine a scenario where that project is started based on a loan taken from a public sector bank. Let's say they took a loan from SBI, 200 crores. That project is now stalled. Who will bear that brunt? Because it's a public sector bank, it will eventually become a non-performing asset. And the same economic pain will be felt by common people. Because ultimately it is a taxpayer's money that is recapitalizing this public sector banks. Now you might ask me a question. Are you saying that money is more important than environment? No, that is not the logic. You have to be pragmatic enough. See, once this project is stalled, if you are destroying that project, which is halfway there, is there any guarantee that you will restore the ecological health of that ecosystem? If you want to carry out that study, how much will it cost? You should consider that also. Now, the practical reality is most of the environmental clearances, how are they obtained? They're obtained through a consulting agency, and government agencies sometimes are understaffed. The environmental clearances are not exactly, procedurally late, and these issues cause a lot of headache for companies. There are genuine instances where companies were also harassed because of this environmental clearances despite having everything. What if that scenario happened? So you have to look at both the sides of the argument, right? Now imagine if there is that kind of a scenario, are you telling me that there is no other way to fix the environment after the project is cleared? By default, we should definitely have environmental clearances, no doubt about it. But what if the project already started? Are you mandating using this judgment that we will start the project without an environmental clearance, pay up and show that it is going to cause a lot of economic pain, and then ignore ECs? No, that's not what the judgment is all about. There is always a possibility of a middle path. Now, if you did not bear the cost of environment, why not create a law which makes after the project is installed, why not make it even more stringent? Let's say if you are mandating a clause where there is a mandatory technological upgrade after a certain point of time. Let's say if that if that land is for a coal plant, mandate that within some 7 years or 8 years, you should move towards criticality or have a, a technological upgrade that will mandate something like flue gas desulfurization technology so that sulfur emissions are stopped. Just an example. It's true that the existing plants are by default coming up with this technology, but I'm just giving you an example of mandating some upgrade which will be helpful for environment. So there is always a middle path that we can take, and I always say that your answers in exam should neither be too idealistic nor too pessimistic. Somewhere in the middle. And I propose a check 3-point formula that you can think. See, any decision that you take should be socially acceptable, economically feasible, administratively viable. Within the administrative legal framework only, you should base your action, and that should be economically possible. Now, if I say to stop the problem of corruption and leakage, I will put everything on blockchain. Do you know how much power is required to run a blockchain? It's simply an overkill. It's a stupid idea at this point of time. To say that we will put entire public distribution system on a blockchain is a very bad idea given the energy needs. So it is not economically viable. So this solution should never be opted. Socially acceptable. What do you mean by socially acceptable? If you had made, let's say, UPI, not QR code based, but let's say every time you want to open a transaction, open your coding compiler, run a code, type a code, compile it. If there are any errors, fix that error and then make a transaction. Do you think financial inclusion would have been a possibility in a country like India? No. It would have been instantly rejected. So every decision that we take should pass through the lens of this C. Socially, economically, and administratively possible. Okay? And that's the kind of framework that we should go through. So in this article, when they are suggesting that we have a environmental regulation as a idealistic scenario. If you take a look at this, the court will now have to reassemble to hear the challenges anew. When it does so, it will do well to remember that the validity of the two notifications is not the only thing at stake here, but also the credibility of India's rule of law. One major parameter or complaint that a lot of multinational companies have when they want to invest in India is the time taken for adjudication when any legal matter pops up. So how do you balance this so-called ease of doing business where there should not be any litigation, at the same time have a safe environmental clearance protocol? This is the balance. And yes, courts should come up with that middle path. Some guidelines should be created, and a specialist task force which requires a interagency coordination is definitely needed. Can you think of any governance architecture which is already existing right now, on the top of which we can add this? These are all tribunals. I mean, the side of judiciary. I'm talking about a governance architecture. Gati Shakti Master Plan. Put environmental clearances, include Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change within the framework of National Gati Shakti Master Plan. At the time of clearances, you have to pass it through Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change, EC department. See, environmental clearances are not the only way to ensure that our environment is safe. It's one of the law. You have Environment Protection Act, Air Act, Water Act, Wildlife Act, Biodiversity Act. What is the legal basis of EC? How environmental impact assessment is mandated? What is the legal basis? Based on which law? Environment Protection Act 1986. The subsequent first notification came out in 1994, followed by 2006, followed by the latest amendment in 1920, or maybe somewhere around that time. 21? When was the last notification? Go just check once. The subsequent notification changes diluted the provisions of the environmental impact assessment. But that's one of the tool available to safeguard our environment, not the only one. So this is how you have to analyze this issue within the larger principle framework of environmental jurisprudence. So the larger topic is environmental jurisprudence. What do you mean by jurisprudence? It is the legal logic, the principles for which form the basis. Okay, this form the basis for our legal architecture of environmental laws. What are the environmental laws that we have? Okay, first let's look at the Constitution. It starts with Article 21. This Article 21, right to life, is further extrapolated and interpreted in various Supreme Court judgments. Okay. For example, you have the MC Mehta case. Then you have the common cause. Then you have the TAS trapezium case. Then you have the various judgment passed by the National Green Tribunal. All of this are a part of our approach towards safeguarding environment. So this is a question from 2022 mains in GS2. We are talking about environmental laws, not environment. Please be clear. How can we use laws to safeguard environment? GS2 subject, not GS3. But if you are preparing for prelims, you will definitely get questions from this environmental laws and you will be studying it under environment subject only. But in mains, they've asked it in GS2 because it is about a law, legal principle, not environmental principle. That is how you should clearly know the difference, how to approach in GS2 and how to approach in GS3. In GS3, they will be asking the law in prelims exam, and the way they ask it is through an environmental logic. Why is an animal placed in vermin list? Why is it placed in schedule 1? That is environment logic. So if it is critically endangered, that is why it is placed in. They are not asking what is the schedule 1, what is the schedule 5 or schedule 6. They're not asking the schedules or the laws. They're asking the environmental principle logic. But when it comes to GS2, they're asking the legal logic, environmental jurisprudence. So both logics should be studied side by side. Clear? This topic, environmental laws, if you read from environment lens, you should always ask what environmental principle is that law safeguarding. The same part, if you read it in GS2, you should ask what law and legal principle is safeguarding the environment. The lens change, two sides of the same coin. Clear? Okay. So this is the analysis for the first issue. To scale up our climate ambition, a 7-point plan. Now, let's go to the topic of climate transition. We have discussed this topic multiple times, but let's quickly discuss the 7-point agenda also. Climate transition. What do you mean by this? Climate transition as a word? What do you mean by just transition? No, what is climate transition? How would you explain climate transition here? Right now, the global average of our climate, the temperature of our climate is increasing. So, the climate is undergoing a transition. So, our lifestyle pathways should undergo a transition. Energy pathways, carbon pathways, or lifestyle pathways in general should undergo this transition. As a part of this agenda, the largest weightage is given to the theme of decarbonization of our economy. What do you mean by this decarbonization of our economy? To understand this, you need to understand the present economic model. Land, labor, capital, enterprise. Within this enterprise, what is the core aspect? Technology. This technology is now built on fossil fuels. This fossil fuels is the basis for energy. Clear? Take a look at this logic first. Our decarbonization as a theme is contingent on understanding how business works in the present world. The economic model. That economic model, if you divide it into 4 factors of production: land, labor, capital, enterprise. Fourth point, enterprising ability, is contingent on our understanding of GS3 technology. Technology at this point of time is based on fossil fuels. And fossil fuels are polluting in nature. And if we want to focus on the future, we have to move away from these fossil fuels to ensure that energy access is clean. This is the pathway that we have to take going forward. Clear? Now, it is in this context, this word decarbonization becomes important, because the present fossil fuel led growth is increasing carbon emissions. So there is a greenhouse gas effect, and this greenhouse gas effect is warming up the climate and altering the lifestyles, and also how the climate as a phenomenon would impact the multiple systems, which is impacting all the systems like life, water, air, everything. Basically, it is impacting our productivity. Now, when I say this enterprising ability is linked to our technology, let's go back to the first industrial revolution. In that first industrial revolution, we saw the steam engine coming up, which again was dependent on energy, coal. Then in IR 2.0, it is built on this. You have the, let's say, assembly line and mass market based models. To this assembly line as a technology, you have one more wrapper over it, which is colonial plus imperial agenda, which increase the market. So this coal based consumption is further amplified, leading to greenhouse gas effect kicking in. Then we transition to IR 3.0, which is internet plus IT. Now, because of this, money became abundant. So this increased consumption. So here we are not only talking about coal or energy resources, we are talking about resource abuse. Air, water, land, everything. Every single element of earth is polluted. And finally, now we are talking about IR 4.0, and we discussed how AI is extremely energy intensive. In a world which is going to be increasingly AI driven, you know how much power is consumed if you just say hi to ChatGPT. There was a tweet from Sam Altman where he said that please stop using the word please, because it would consume extra tokens and GPUs are getting heated up. It is consuming more power. I was also making a joke. It costs now to be polite. There is always a saying that it doesn't cost to be polite. With this news, even that is changing. The grammar, semantics, the way we live our life, everything is changing. So being rude and blunt will be economical henceforth. And it's interesting to see how it will impact human interactions going forward. So because let's say, just a small digression, a behavioral aspect. In our school time, when this letter writing as an activity was there, we used to write lengthy letters. when we started, when I started to work in the corporate field, over a period of time, I noticed that it's all redundant. Please get to the point. Like a one-line answer is more than enough. So, there is this high and subject to the point, katam. Now that the communication is even more blunt. Need, leave, dot. Yes or no, approve or reject. That's all. No questions asked. If he has a leave, it has to be approved. And Amazon has this wonderful policy. If an idea is proposed to change the governance architecture, by default, it should be accepted and passed to the next level until the respective head has a very solid reason to reject it. That is Amazon's idea to make sure that all the good ideas are accepted. And what Amazon noticed was no leader was willing to take the pain of accepting an idea, sitting on it, rejecting it. So recently, they even automated that decision making. Now, even mid-level managers are laid off after this. The R&D team is severely downsized. In this kind of a world, not only the behavioral aspects are changing, the needs of this country, the business models, the way we communicate, the way we interact, every single thing is undergoing a transition. It is in this kind of a world, having an energy transition pathway is all the more important because it will impact how humans will live their life going forward. So the context, both economic wise, socially, is set. How do we get there now? This article proposes a decarbonization agenda as one of the facet to get to that climate transition pathway. The 7 principles that are discussed here is actually written by Mr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia, who is part of the advisory council for the Prime Minister's Scientific Advisory Office. And he was also a part of various groupings where economic decisions were taken. He has a very vast experience. So when he comes up with an article like this, you better take it seriously because that's the line of thinking going forward. Am I saying that you should blindly accept whatever he's saying? No. Always question it. You take the counter argument to whatever he's saying, and then maybe that's a way where you will find the missing puzzle someday. When you are always questioning, accept it until you find a better alternative. But always look at it with skepticism. The day you find the other side of the argument, you have much more nuanced understanding of this topic. And that's how I would suggest you go forward and learn every topic. So what are the 7 steps that we are talking about? Let us have a look. Step number 1. Higher target for reducing the emissions intensity. In our Paris climate deal, we have something called the INDCs. Okay. So something that we set ourselves as a target voluntarily as our part of the climate deal to ensure that we are safeguarding our environment. At that point of time, what was the target? We will achieve so the original target was from 2005 level. Whatever was the emissions intensity at that point of time, by 2030, we will cut it down by 45%. If we indeed get there, we should focus on increasing the target to 65%. And the projected GDP growth over this is 7.6%, which implies that total emissions will continue to rise, but at a declining rate. What do you mean by this? There is an inherent link between environment and economy. In a growing economy, energy consumption will definitely increase. Let's say, for example, if this class had 200 more members, you will have to add more lights, more chairs, everything, right? So when economic activity increases, energy access becomes indispensable. In that kind of a system, you cannot expect the country to cut down the emissions. They will continue to rise. But instead of growing 5x, maybe we'll grow 2x. If we have this target, the technology pathways that we take up will actually cut down. Clear? That is the first suggestion. Second one, by 2030, we have a target of getting 50% of our power sources from renewable energy. The target, according to Mr. Ahluwalia, should be 80% in the next 5 years after that. Then, third suggestion is that we have to simultaneously phase down coal. This phasing down coal is a very long debate which was discussed right from 2019 or 2020. It's a 2019 economic survey. Can India afford to phase down coal? Not really. Why? We have discussed it multiple times. Power generation from other sources is not reliable. If you want to go for solar, you don't have battery. If you have to go for hydro, it is dependent on monsoon. If you want to go for nuclear, safety issues. If you go for small modular reactors, we have to see how it will happen. At this point of time, a practical solution would be to go for coal. This is one practical need. Second practical need is East India, which is relatively the source of these minerals, the coal belt, Chota Nagpur Plateau, Jharkhand, etc. They have extreme poverty. Their economies are contingent on this coal economy only. Even Telangana, for example, depends on, northern part of Telangana depends on Singareni. Right? If you decide to shut down Singareni suddenly, what will happen to all the families that are depending on them? It's definitely accepted that coal is polluted. But how do we suggest an alternative? Let's say you move towards solar. We have seen the other day how it will impact the lives of common people, pastoral communities. For everything, there is a trade-off. Do you have a framework for taking the right decision? It's not that easy. And yet, it is necessary. So, in this space, we need some help in terms of consulting and creating a approach, regional based strategy. Now, fourth, electrification of the major sectors. See, decarbonization agenda, when you're talking about it, most of the sectors are dependent on access to fossil fuels. If you want to move away from fossil fuels to electricity generated from renewable energy, you need to lay down the entire value chain of electricity, right from generation till final point, including the connection to the national grid. Okay, so if you want to depend on renewable energy, what is the cost it will incur? We have to figure that out. Simply saying that electrification of our fleet is not going to cut the cost. What is the point of an electric vehicle if the battery that it is charging on is generated through coal? You are just shifting the balance from one area to another. We shouldn't be doing that. In fact, you are having a double burden. You are increasing coal. And secondly, the lithium that this engine depends on is not available in India. So that's the danger. How do we go about it then? It's not that straightforward. That's the precarious situation that our country is in. Understood? Next, we were discussing about the carbon credit trading scheme. I think we discussed this carbon credit scheme multiple times. You can go back and check in the Telegram channel about the details of this. Okay. Sixth, higher share of renewables, which will imply greater intraday and seasonal variability. See, we have to mix and match. Again, this is based on the national grid logic. You won't have peak demand for coal in the morning, maybe in the evenings it will peak out. So if you can mix and match coal only to supplement our needs in the evening, at least in the morning times we can reduce our consumption. So that's one strategy, energy mix strategy. And finally, the proposed expansion in renewable generation will require money. Where will you go? Multilateral development banks, let's say for example World Bank, like institutions. If you can depend on these kind of institutions and generate revenue, the climate finance part will be addressed. So this is the 7-step agenda for climate transition. I think this single article is good enough for generating content for entire topic of climate change and energy transition. Having said that, for prelims, each of the 7 themes will become important, and also in mains, each of the 7 points will become standalone questions. Consider this like a combination of 7 10 markers, and also um, a part of the essay. By doing so, you will get a lot of clarity on the entire theme of climate transition. Clear? A missing link in India's mineral mission. Same story, related to environment. Why are rare earths important? Because they are the future pathways for energy transition. Problem is India doesn't have those minerals. So not only that, other minerals which are required in this ecosystem are not exploited by us. One is exploration, the second part is processing whatever you explore. It's not like India can find minerals in their earth, in their territory, extract it and sell it to China. What's the point? What do you do after extracting? You process it and make it useful for your industry. But even for that, you need skill. Just by digging up, it's not useful. Processing becomes important. And it is in this context of processing only, our government came up with a rare earth magnet scheme, and this was discussed way back in G20 summit only. The discussions were coming up from that point. Okay. There was criticism that even this scheme will not be helpful because China will buy the end product and they will import it in their country and do the same thing. Still better, it's helping the economy. Rather than doing nothing, this is better. Okay, that is the gist of this article. Rest all are the 5 points which I think you will have to just read the headlines. For example, innovation. You need science and technology to make this processing game better. Unlock secondary sources to recover critical minerals. In this process of extracting minerals, you would require other minerals too in creating the equipment. Focus on those two. You developed the we changed the Mines and Minerals Development Act recently to make mining much more participatory. We opened up the mining sector for private players. Recently, we even opened up the nuclear sector for private players. So collaborate and make it possible through our academic institutions, through academic industry interface. Third, skill them. Metallurgy is a ignored engineering discipline. Now anyone who is doing a metallurgy degree in engineering, they should be valued in our country through this scheme. That's what this article is talking about. Fourth, risk investment through assurance and financing tools. Basically, any company will refuse to invest in our country because of the governance risk. So if you have an insurance product and other financial products that will de-risk your investment, investments will flow in. This is what the article is saying. And finally, there is mineral diplomacy to link this entire to the global value chains. What is diplomacy? Finding a middle ground so that we negotiate and create a pathway that is useful for all the stakeholders. So even minerals will become a part of the diplomatic engagement. This is what the article is saying. This is something that you can read for yourself for prelims. So that's it for the day. Thank you. All the articles are interrelated with respect to environment. So please go back and do your homework, especially that 7-point agenda. That's it for the day. Thank you.